Is there any question that we live in a dangerous world today? We live in a country where an insurrection is going on. Democracies all over the world are threatened by dictators. The best example being Russian military currently at the border of Ukraine. And we see our planet heating up, which is threatening our very existence. Witness more tornadoes, hurricanes, flooding in every section of the country and more often. Then there is the surge of hate groups with anti-Semitism at its core. We are witnessing this surge in our own backyard of Greater Chicago, with synagogues, temples, and Jews the victims, and the neo-Nazis being more brazen even in the daylight hours. We are fortunate today to have someone who can help us sort it all out, insofar as it involves anti-Semitism. It is Trent Spoolstra, Associate Regional Director of the Anti-Defamation League of the Midwest. Before joining the Anti-Defamation League, Trent worked as a high school history teacher in Houston, Texas, and with AmeriCorps Vista in Indiana. He holds a bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Notre Dame and a master's degree in international affairs from Texas A&M University. Let's welcome Trent Spoolstra.
Thank you very much. Don, thank you very much. I also would like to thank Ron, as well as Jill, for allowing me to speak here today. I believe last year, my boss, David Goldenberg, who's our regional director, spoke to North Shore Senior Center, so I'm glad to be invited back. This topic is heavy, just to let you all know as fair warning, but looking forward to speaking with you all and to talk about ADL and talk about what is going on here in the world. So let me share my screen. Excellent. Okay. So the state of hate, specifically looking at the state of anti-Semitism here in the world. So for our agenda first, I'll give an overview of ADL for those who may not be familiar with our organization. Spend a few minutes talking about that. Next, I'll move on to national and international anti-Semitic attitudes. So some very key polling that has taken place in the last few years. Next, after that, I'll look at national as well as local anti-Semitic incidences, specifically what happened about a week and a half ago in West Rogers Park. After that, I'll give a brief overview of a new partnership ADL has established with Hillel, which is a student organization that serves Jewish students on college campuses, survey that came out last fall. After that, I will look at how we are asking and what we need help with here at ADL. And then afterwards, would love time for Q&A. So my presentation normally goes about 35, 40 minutes. After that, happy to take as many questions as there are. So first, the Anti-Defamation League. We were founded in 1913, and our mission, fortunately or unfortunately, has remained the same for almost now 110 years, which is number one, to stop the defamation of the Jewish people, and number two, to secure justice and fair treatment for all. That was our mission in 1913. It is still our mission and still very relevant today in 2022. To give you a kind of an aspect of how big our organization is. So we are a private, tax-exempt, nonpartisan organization, nonprofit organization. We have 25 regional offices across the United States. So we work here in Chicago. My job is to look over the Midwest, which I'll talk about here in a second. But from north, south, east, west, coast to coast, we cover all 50 states. We are in all major cities across our country. We are headquartered in New York City. And when we say ADL Midwest, I know everybody's definition of the Midwest is a little bit different, but our Midwest is kind of this peach-colored region, if you see here. So we cover the state of Indiana, we cover the northern half of Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and the Dakotas. So like I said, when we say ADL Midwest, it is this kind of upper Midwest region here. So a lot of people, when they hear about ADL, they say, oh, wait a minute, you guys are that Jewish civil rights organization. That kind of explains who we are. A better description is we like to think of as America's leading anti-hate organization. And while I'll be speaking mostly about anti-Semitism today, I did want to make clear we fight all types of hate here at ADL. Yes, anti-Semitism is a big part of what we do, but we also fight racism. We fight sexism. We fight homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, bigotry in all of its forms. We fight extremism from the far left to the far right on the political spectrum. And in the last 20 years or so, now with the proliferation of the internet and social media, we are very much about fighting cyber hate as well. So we are really an anti-hate organization fighting all forms of hate. People will say, well, that's great, right? So how exactly do you guys fight hate? And the best way I can describe it, and I could spend all day on this slide, given all the programs that we have. But to summarize, the best way to think about how we fight hate is how I would like to call the 3 8s, if you will. We investigate, we educate, and we advocate. In terms of investigation, we actually have a top-notch team of analysts in what's called our Center on Extremism. So we have about 45 to 50 individuals who serve in this center. And the jobs of these analysts all day, and I'm a little jealous because they get to do some pretty cool stuff, but the job is to look at everything from websites to social media accounts to blog posts of all different types of hate groups on the far left and the far right. So we do a lot of investigation trying to keep up to date on what hate groups are doing across the United States and the world. Next, we educate. We are in K through 12 schools. We are across universities. We provide programming and education. We provide chapters, things like No Place for Hate, which are clubs that are set up in schools to promote tolerance. We have programs like Echoes and Reflections that will educate teachers on teaching the Holocaust. But we don't just educate children. We're actually one of the biggest educators of law enforcement. So ADL, we have a very, very strong relationship with local, state, and federal law enforcement across the United States. And we will train law enforcement in everything from hate crimes to extremism to inclusive policing. So we do a lot of education. And finally, we advocate. So we will advocate for local, state, and federal laws for things such as hate crimes, funding for security, including the nonprofit security grant program, as well as mandating Holocaust education and extremism education so that the future generations will know what is happening and hopefully we create a more just and fair society. But that's how we do it. We investigate, we educate, and we advocate. As an organization being around for over 100 years, we've done quite a number of things, and I wanted to highlight some of the things that we've done since 1913. So back in the 1920s, Henry Ford, of course, the famous automaker, came out with the pamphlet called The International Jew, which helped spread what was called the Elders of the Protocols of Zion, which is a very anti-Semitic and a very, very fake pamphlet that talks about Jews taking over the world. Right from the 1920s, we were there fighting anti-Semitism. ADL actually came up with its own pamphlet to counter Henry Ford, and we went on our national campaign to tell people that what Henry Ford was talking about was incorrect and was hateful. In the 1950s, we were involved in the civil rights movement. We filed an amicus brief, or a brief supporting a case in Brown versus Board of Education, which of course was the case that finally made segregation of public schools illegal. Since the 1970s, ADL has been very involved in the pro-Israel movement. As an organization, we believe in a Jewish and a democratic Israel. We believe in the two-state solution, and we want to see peace between Israelis and their Arab neighbors. In the 1980s, ADL was involved in what was called the Civil Liberties Act of 1988. So we actually worked with Asian American groups for the United States to officially apologize for Japanese internment camps during World War II. In the 2000s and 2010s, we were involved in marriage equality. We filed amicus briefs against the DOMA Amendment, the Defense of Marriage Act, and also filed briefs in a number of same-sex marriage cases, including Obergefell versus Hodges, which of course made same-sex marriage legal across the United States. And finally, there are times like any major organization where we've made mistakes, and we try to go back and we try to correct and admit our faults. About 10 years ago, there was controversy in New York City regarding the building of a mosque close to the 9/11 grounds where the Twin Towers were destroyed. In 2011, ADL initially came out against building such a mosque. I mention this because actually back in September, our CEO, Jonathan Greenblatt, he's been on the TV circuit lately, he came out in a very public way and spread across different news outlets, basically saying that we were wrong, that we should have supported the building of this mosque because it would have promoted tolerance, and that we got it wrong. So there are times when we look back in our history and say, we didn't get it right, and we need to justify this, we need to move on and do best. But these are some of the highlights of what we've done as an organization. So that's an overview of ADL. Next, I'd like to go over some national and international statistics regarding anti-Semitism. So first, you would think this would be easy to define, but there are a number of definitions on what exactly is anti-Semitism. There are about 3 or 4 major definitions across the world. ADL, we proudly adhere to what is called the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. And anti-Semitism is defined as a certain perception of Jews, which may be expressed as hatred. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed toward Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and their property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. So it's not just about attacking Jews, but people who attack synagogues and temples, if they attack JCCs, if they attack Jewish federations, that is considered anti-Semitic. The top part of the definition is pretty straightforward. Where it gets controversial for a lot of groups, especially on the far left and the far right, is the bottom example. What is considered modern examples of anti-Semitism? And included in this definition, they give certain examples, such as Holocaust denial, accusing Jews in Israel of exaggerating the Holocaust for their benefit. Dual loyalty, the idea that Jews are more loyal to Israel than they are to their home countries, like the United States. Claiming that the state of Israel is a racist endeavor, that it's a country that was founded on racism and it shouldn't exist. Comparing Israeli policy to Nazism. And then finally, holding all Jews in the world responsible for Israeli actions. This is an example and a definition, by the way, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. This definition is followed by 31 countries across the world, here in North America, South America, Europe, and there's even one in Asia and South Korea. This is also followed by our US State Department. So there are a lot of people and a lot of organizations, especially on the far left and far right, that says that no, this definition is horrible and terrible. We'll tell that to the 31 countries around the world that adhere to this definition, of which ADL adheres to. So the good news, before I get to the depressing part of my presentation, the good news is that over the long period of time, going back to the 1960s to present day, anti-Semitism actually has gone down. At one point in 1964, almost a third of Americans held anti-Semitic beliefs. Looking to 2019, that number is down to about 11 to 12%. So we do see this kind of gradual decline over the long term. Unfortunately, I'm about to show you here in a few minutes, over the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen a dramatic rise again in anti-Semitism across the United States. But even with a decrease, if you will, over the long term of anti-Semitism, we still see that a lot of Americans still hold some very, I'd say, damaging and I think common stereotypes or tropes of Jews. So for instance, 27% of Americans still believe that Jews are responsible for the death of Jesus. 24% of Americans, 1 out of 4, believe that at the end of the day, Jews are actually more loyal to Israel than they are to the United States. 20% believe that Jews talk way too much about the Holocaust, which is interesting because as a former high school history teacher, I can tell you that the Holocaust is not taught nearly as much as it should be. 15% of Americans believe that Jews have too much power in the business world. And then 10% believe that Jews have too much control over the US government, specifically our foreign policy as it relates to Israel. So that's from the American perspective. What about the international perspective? So every few years, ADL will partner with groups, and we have what is called our Global 100 survey. And here's the thing, we will call individuals from across the world, and you can't just call people and ask, hey, are you anti-Semitic? Right? Most of the time, they're going to obviously say no. Who wants to claim that they hate Jews, right? Or have ill will. So here's what we do. When we call individuals for the survey all across the world, we will ask people these 11 questions. And if they answer yes to 6 out of the 11, so the majority of them, we determine that that individual probably holds anti-Semitic beliefs, right? And I won't read all these 11, but you can see examples of Jews have too much power in the business world. They have too much control over global affairs. They think they're better than other people, right? So these are pretty stark statements. But like I said, if people answer yes to 6 out of the 11, they probably hold anti-Semitic beliefs. To give you a representation of seeing that anti-Semitism is not just a problem in the Middle East, not just a problem here in the US, I actually have 6 countries here where we conducted these surveys. So we have Canada, Germany, Poland, Russia, South Africa, and Brazil. And here were the results of the percentages of the populations of these countries that hold anti-Semitic beliefs. As you can see here, our neighbor to the north, Canada, not a lot of anti-Semitism. Germany, to its credit, has done a lot since post-World War II to acknowledge and to try to rectify what happened with the Holocaust, only about 15%. But then the numbers get scary. In Poland, for instance, of course, Poland was the location of many of the extermination camps during World War II, the Holocaust. 48% of Poles still hold anti-Semitic beliefs, half of Poles. In Russia, a third of Russians hold anti-Semitic beliefs. And what was probably equally disturbing is that Brazil and South Africa are named as 2 developing countries, countries that will grow in significance in the 21st century. 47% of South Africans hold anti-Semitic beliefs, and in Brazil, a quarter. So this just goes to show you that anti-Semitism is not just a problem here in the United States. It's not a problem in the Middle East. It is truly a global issue moving forward. So that's the national, international stage. Let's bring it a little closer to home, looking at national and anti-Semitic instances. So first, I should note that ADL, we conduct an annual anti-Semitic audit. The numbers I'm about to show you are from 2019, 2020. The numbers for 2021 are currently being worked on as we speak, and hopefully that report will come out later this spring. I will be happy to share it with Jill when it comes out, or if you come back in March or April, look at adl.org. We do a pretty good job of keeping that up to date on our website. So current numbers we're still working on, but I will show you the numbers for the last couple of years here. So looking at this graph here, we have basically the 2010s, so 2011 up till 2020. And this graph shows the number of anti-Semitic instances that have occurred across the United States. And one of the things that you will notice is in 2011, we had about 1,100 instances across the United States, and then the numbers started going down. And then what happened, and starting in 2016, going to present day, the numbers skyrocketed. In 2020, for instance, we had over 2,000 anti-Semitic instances across the United States. To put that in perspective, that is five instances every single day in the United States. And that could be from everywhere from vandalism to assault to swastika graffiti being painted to anti-Semitic caricatures. There's a lot going on. What is equally alarming is that, like I said, we've been conducting this annual survey since 1979, so for over 40 years. The period of 2017 to 2020 was the highest 4 years that we've tracked since we began over 40 years ago. And while we don't have the numbers yet for 2021, I would not be surprised if it was still in that 1,800 to 2,000 range. We probably are going to have numbers that equal that. Hopefully I'm wrong, but still incredibly, incredibly high. So here in our Midwest region, so looking at Indiana, Illinois, Minnesota, the Dakotas, right, we are also seeing numbers skyrocket. In 2016, we had about 58 anti-Semitic instances take place. In 2019, 2020, we had over 100. That is an 84% increase since 2016. So this is not just a problem in LA or New York or Miami. It is a problem here in Chicago and here in the Midwest as well. To bring it even closer, so looking specifically, I want to give you guys an example of anti-Semitic instances that happened about a week and a half ago in West Rogers Park. Like I mentioned, anti-Semitic instances have been up 84% in the last 5 years here in the Midwest. There were multiple anti-Semitic instances not too far away from North Shore Senior Center that happened in the period of 5 days. So this was about a week and a half ago, went from about Friday to Tuesday. In those 5 days in West Rogers Park, which has a significantly large Orthodox Jewish population, there were 2 synagogues that were vandalized with swastika graffiti. There were vandalism of 2 Jewish day schools. A man was assaulted on his way to Friday night services. A window, as you can see here in the photo, was smashed at Kol Tov Kosher Foods. A door was smashed right next door. I believe that's where this plywood is nailed up to, at the Tel Aviv bakery. And then finally on a Tuesday, there was a congregant that was attacked at a 3rd synagogue. All of this happened, ladies and gentlemen, within 5 days. It was a pretty busy time here in our office. The silver lining, I should mention, is that immediately when these things happened, Mayor Lightfoot, State's Attorney Kim Foxx, and our Chicago Police Superintendent David Brown were on the scene. Press conferences were held, and they came out strongly condemning what had taken place. So thankfully, our police officials, our elected officials are here in support of the Jewish community. But nonetheless, a lot of anti-Semitic instances happened in a very short amount of time locally here in Chicago. Transitioning here a bit, there are a lot of questions that ask, well, Trent, when it comes to Israel, right, when does it cross the line into legitimate criticism of Israel versus when it gets anti-Semitic? This is where it gets a little murky, I admit. I do want to note that not all criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic, not at all. In fact, ADL, there are a number of times that we have criticized the Israeli government for certain policies, right? So any criticism of Israel isn't necessarily anti-Semitic. But when does it cross the line? And the best way to describe this, and I think the best way I can kind of picture it, is what are called the 3 Ds: delegitimization, demonization, and double standards. Delegitimization. If somebody were to say, for instance, it would probably just be easier if Israel as a country just didn't exist. That is anti-Semitic. This is a country that has existed for over 70 years and is very prosperous. Demonization. Good graphic here. As you see in this painting, you have an individual with horns, right, and a pitchfork, characterizing Jews as devils, right, devil worshippers or demons, right? That is anti-Semitic. And double standards. Criticizing Israeli policy is not bad. But the question is, why the major focus on Israel when countries surrounding Israel, such as Egypt and Jordan and Saudi Arabia, have way worse human rights records compared to Israel, which is the only true liberal democracy in the Middle East? When one of those 3 Ds is crossed, that's when we start getting into the line of, this is no longer legitimate criticism of Israel. This is considered anti-Semitic. Last May, I'll give you kind of a real life example here. Last May, there was a recent fighting that took place between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Okay. Now, anytime that fighting heats up and takes place, there are groups that say, you know what, anti-Semitism doesn't skyrocket. That is completely false, and we have statistics that prove it. This chart shows the number of anti-Semitic incidences that happened in May of 2020 compared to May of 2021 when the recent conflict took place. And what we saw, there was a 115% increase here in the United States of attacks on Jews when Israel and Hamas were in recent conflict. And this is an example of modern day anti-Semitism, when all Jews, regardless of however they feel about Israel, just because they are Jewish, they are held to the standards and they are criticized for Israeli policy. So we know for a fact that anytime when Israel and Hamas get into a fight, or Hezbollah, anti-Semitic attacks in the United States go up. And some more local examples here of the recent conflict that happened in May of 2021. What you see here on the left is a sign that says Freedom for Palestine. That's nothing wrong with that. That's free speech, right? Completely fine with that. The problem, though, is this sign was posted right next to the Persian Hebrew synagogue in Skokie, not to mention that you can kind of see in the photo here, there was a rock that was thrown through that window. This is an example of modern day anti-Semitism. This synagogue had nothing to do with Israeli policy, but because they are Jewish, and because some people believe that all Jews should be held responsible for the actions of Israel, this synagogue was targeted. That is anti-Semitism. On the right, there was a group of pro-Palestinian, pro-Arab individuals who were protesting. Completely fine. They're on a public street. They have every right to be there. The problem, though, was these individuals were located right across the street from Temple Beth Israel in Skokie. and they were chanting things like Antifada, and from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Another example of Temple Beth Israel had nothing to do with Israeli policy, nothing to do with fighting, but this group decided, hey, there's probably a synagogue down the street. Let's go protest. Let's hold all Jews accountable. These are examples of modern day anti-Semitism. Next, I want to go over, it's not just anti-Semitism on the international stage, it's happening on college campuses. And many of you, I suspect, have children or maybe grandchildren who are in college and want to discuss what is taking place on college campuses right now, because it's truly a hotbed. So first, a partnership was held between ADL and Hillel International. And for those who are not familiar, Hillel is an organization that serves Jewish students on college campuses. But a partnership was formalized in August of last year. And part of this partnership not only includes curriculum training or incident reports, but also holding campus surveys. The survey results I'm about to show you were conducted in July and August of last year. The survey size is about 750 self-identified Jewish undergraduate students, and they represent over 200 colleges and universities, including here in the Midwest. Here were the results. 43% of students, Jewish undergraduate students, had either experienced anti-Semitism themselves and or witnessed anti-Semitic activity on college campuses. That is almost half of the Jewish population on college campuses. The next number actually really gets under my skin. 15% of students feel the need to hide their Jewish identity. That means that they don't feel comfortable wearing a Star of David necklace. They don't feel comfortable wearing their yarmulke. They don't feel comfortable being identified as Jewish. 1 out of 8 students in the United States. 75% of respondents had personally experienced anti-Semitism, but they did not report it. 75%. That is still in line with other victims of hate crimes, but just imagine the number of instances that are actually taking place on college campuses that we don't know about because people don't report them. And finally, what we are seeing here is most often groups like BDS or far left groups are usually the targets, if you will, of people who are criticizing Jewish students. In fact, Jewish students on campus are seeing anti-Semitism from the politically far left and the politically far right. But this is an example of what's taking place on college campuses right now. So the $1 million question I get often is, Trent, why now? Why is this taking place right now? Why are these numbers skyrocketing with anti-Semitism? And I wish I could give you a specific answer. I wish I had a magic wand and said it's specifically this. I can wave it around, poof, problem solved. Fortunately, it's not that easy. But what we do see and what we can probably speculate is that there are probably 3 things occurring with this, why we're seeing numbers go up. Number 1, the political and social environment. I think we can all agree that in the last 6 or 7 years here in the United States, things have been very tense. Regardless of wherever you fit on the political spectrum, the last 2 presidential elections have been very controversial and have been very intense. In 2016, when Donald Trump won the presidency, there were people, liberals, who said, I will not acknowledge him as my president. I will do everything I can to fight against him. Fast forward to 2020, President Biden wins the election. There were people on the right who said, I will not admit that Trump lost the election. And of course, this culminated in the January 6th insurrection on Capitol Hill. So politically, things are very tense. Of course, socially, the elephant in the room, the reason why I'm presenting on Zoom and not in person, of course, is COVID. This is a time where people are very scared and are angry and are upset about what is taking place across the United States regarding this virus, right? And I think it is just kind of a natural human tendency. It's not right, but it's a natural tendency that when things are going wrong, we like to blame people. It has to be somebody's fault, right? And the canary in the coal mine, as Jonathan Greenblatt would normally say, the group that always gets targeted when anything goes wrong are Jews. I think that's a big part of it. The second part of it, the internet and social media. I'm going to age myself a little bit here, but when I was in high school, MySpace was the big social media platform. Everybody was on it, right? Fast forward, and today there are a number of social media accounts. You have Twitter, you have Facebook, you have LinkedIn. MySpace doesn't really exist all that more. Snapchat, TikTok, everybody's on a social media account. And the problem is, it's great that it's a great free speech mechanism, But everybody, including hate groups, are now on social media, and they are recruiting and they are spreading their vile rhetoric, and they're getting people to sign up. The January 6th insurrection was a perfect example of people posting on Facebook and Twitter, where people then met up and they tried taking over the Capitol building. And then lastly, ignorance. As simple as it is that there are a lot of people in the United States who have never met a Jewish person before, or maybe they've seen a movie, or maybe they've seen a TV show, right? But they go off of stereotypes and they assume, well, I've never met a Jewish person, so they all must have a lot of money. They all must control Wall Street. They all must have some kind of form on the government, right? But these are probably three key reasons why this is going on right now, why we're seeing such a dramatic rise. My last section here, how can you help? If you feel so empowered, if you feel stirred about my presentation, there are specific ways that people can get involved in the things that I ask of you today. So first, we have some pretty bold goals for our ADL Midwest office that we hope to accomplish by 2025. First, we hope to double the number of law enforcement officials that we train. Currently, we train about 9,000 officers. We want to increase that to about 18,000 by the end of 2025. Second, like I mentioned, we're in schools providing education, providing resources. We want to reach out to 500,000 school children annually by the end of 2025. We're reaching out to about 22,000 right now. Regarding advocacy, we want to drive policy debate, and we want to secure major legislative wins, including hate crime laws in Indiana, Minnesota, mandating Holocaust education, and preventing people who are extremists from becoming law enforcement officials. And then finally, another program that I run called the Signature Synagogue Program that provides presentations and webinars, things like that at synagogues. We want to recruit up to 50 synagogues in our region. By the end of 2025, we currently have 13. So these are some of the big goals. The specific asks, the ways that people can get involved that can really help us and really kind of shape and increase tolerance. Number one, reporting a hate incident. I'll show you here in a second. It's very easy to go online, it takes 5 minutes. If you see something, say something. That's the biggest thing that we ask of all people in our society. Do not keep it hidden. Don't be afraid to say something. Please report it. Number two, introductions to schools for new No Place for Hate chapters. Maybe you know someone who is a teacher now. Maybe it is a friend, a colleague, child, or maybe our grandchild who is a teacher. Introduce them to us. We would love to, I will be more than happy to introduce you to our education team as we try to increase the number of schools that we reach out to. Introductions to law enforcement agencies. Maybe you know someone who is a retired police officer, or maybe you know someone who is currently on a police department. Would love to introduce you to our law enforcement team to where we can provide them different trainings. Next, the major legislative ask that we are reaching out to people about is confirming Deborah Lipstadt as the anti-Semitism envoy. This is a position held at the U.S. State Department that oversees the spread of anti-Semitism across the world. And as I showed you a few minutes ago, you can see anti-Semitism is a problem on the international stage. Right now, her nomination is being held up in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and we are urging individuals to please reach out to their senators, in this case, Senators Durham and Duckworth, to reach out to them and say, please nominate Deborah Lipstadt. We need somebody in this position. Number five, if any of you happen to be Jewish, or if you're members of synagogues here in the local area, would love introductions to increase the number of synagogues who are part of this program that I run. Number six, request this presentation for other groups. A lot of times when I give these presentations, it's not me going out and asking for them. A lot of times it's word of mouth or friends of friends that I present this group to. So if you are part of a church group, if you're part of a civic group or a social group that you think would benefit from hearing this presentation, introduce me. I'd love to do a presentation. I can do it virtually, I can do it in person. And then finally, resharing or retweeting Twitter messages, or if we're on Facebook. So these are specific ways, specific asks that we have for people to get involved. In terms of keeping up with ADL Midwest, you can sign up for our monthly newsletter. We're at midwest.adl.org, and you can sign up there. We're on Twitter, and we're also on Facebook. Please join us, keep you updated. And then last slide here, like I mentioned, reporting incidences is the big part of what we ask for people. It is very, very simple. If you go to adl.org, and if you go to the right, you see take action, you can see report incident, and you'll get this screen here. And it's a form that takes no more than 5 minutes to fill out. It comes directly to our office. Our incident response team takes a look at it, see what we can legally do in order to respond to the incident. But reporting things, saying something is the biggest help to ADL that we have. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen. I appreciate everyone listening, and I'd be more than happy to take questions now. Thank you.
Thank you, Trent. We have lots of questions in Zoom, but we're going to go first, and Don can ask the first question in Zoom, but we're going to first go to the audience, and we're going to ask Fred to manage that process. Go ahead, Fred.
Okay, just a minute. Arnie's going to handle the mic here. Okay, we have a question.
Stand up, sir.
Sir, you indicated that you partner with Hillel, but my question is, do you partner with any of the other organizations? For example, Camera, Stand With Us, or any of the Jewish fraternities or fraternities that really used to be Jewish, albeit the fact that AEPI is the only one that has remained such. So my question is, do you partner with any of those other organizations?
Yes, sir. Yeah, no, great question. Yes. So the ADL Hillel partnership is a formal kind of memorandum of understanding between our two organizations. So that's a more formal partnership. However, anytime something happens on campus, ADL is always there to work in a supportive role with groups like Stand With Us or Israel on Campus Coalition, other groups. So for instance, our ADL national office, usually once a week, there's kind of a virtual round table where people will get together. So we are definitely in contact with those organizations, but specifically for ADL, because this partnership is so brand new, we try to work directly with Hillel with our partnership when things are happening on college campuses. But yes, we do have partnerships, informal or formal partnerships with other organizations.
Are there any other questions here? Yeah, we have one in the back.
Hi, do you work with any of the public school systems? I've been reading recently that high schools no longer teach anything about the Holocaust in many instances. So how are kids supposed to know about it if they don't get it in school?
Yep.
And are you working on that at all?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question. So I can't speak from personal experience here in Illinois, but when I taught last year in Houston, Texas, my curriculum coordinator, the person in charge of kind of scheduling everything out, only had a day scheduled to talk about the Holocaust. And as a teacher, I said that is unacceptable. And so actually, I taught AP World History last year. I ended up actually spending an entire week talking about the Holocaust with my AP students because I thought it was that important. But to your point, yes, sir, there are a lot of school districts who some do a very, very good job of talking about the Holocaust. There are others that barely talk about it. And so that's why we want to push for legislative change on the state level to say that to mandate Holocaust education. And this is no longer a choice, that this subject is way too important to not talk about. But a lot of times that, yes, we have 30 No Place for Hate chapters across schools across our Midwest region. We provide information about hate and extremism. We also include topics regarding the Holocaust as well. So these resources are there. I think it's a matter of working with elected officials, working with schools, getting that information out there. But completely agree with you that we need to press more to make sure students are learning about the Holocaust.
Anybody else here in the auditorium? Once, twice? Ron, it's all yours.
Thank you, Fred. We've got a lot of questions from chat. Don, you may, if you have one, please, you begin.
I do. Thanks, Ron. When the neo-Nazis, Trent, marched in Charlottesville a few years ago, chanting, "The Jews will not replace us," did the ADL have any reaction or take anything to do with offsetting what they did?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, Don. Yeah. I mean, that was, I should mention as well, too, and I'll include this in my follow-up email to Jill to share with you all. Our CEO, Jonathan Greenblatt, actually recently wrote a book called It Could Happen Here, talking about how scary the rise of hate is happening here in the United States. And he mentions time and time again what happened in Charlottesville. It was called the Unite the Right rally that happened at the University of Virginia. That was a major watershed moment, I think, for the United States to realize that there are still a lot of people on the far, far right who hold these views. And it's not just older individuals. There were a lot of young individuals there as well. This is not a generational problem. This is a true American problem. So we came out, we spoke out against it. Obviously, there is free speech, so you can't necessarily stop people from saying hate speech, right? But we went out to condemn it. We work with police. We're targeting these neo-Nazi groups to make sure that we know what they're doing, when they're doing. We're in constant contact with law enforcement if these groups get out of hand. So yeah, we were definitely there. It was a major moment for us as an organization. And it is, I think, telling of how strong the far right is still politically in this country.
Thank you for that. We have more than 20 minutes worth of questions, but let me go with the next one for you, Trent. And this is from Bob Dauber. How did the ADL deal with the former administration's seemingly hands-off approach, or more appropriate, in his opinion, ignorance of anti-Semitism and other forms of bigotry in the country?
So, like I mentioned, we are a nonpartisan organization, right? So we, being a nonprofit, I think, to be completely honest, it was mostly negative. There were a few positive aspects. There were a few times where ADL did agree with Donald Trump. A good example was when he moved the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem in Israel. We came out and we thanked Donald Trump. We said, yes, we agree. Like other Jewish organizations, we believe that our embassy needs to be in the capital of Israel, which we believe is Jerusalem. But those examples are few and far between. There were a number of times, and like I mentioned, my CEO recently wrote a book. You can find it on Amazon, find it on a lot of different venues. And he definitely mentions and criticizes Trump a number of times for inflammatory language, not just anti-Semitic language, but anti-immigrant language, anti-Hispanic language. So there were a number of times when we did call out Donald Trump saying that this crosses the line, this is too far.
Let me ask a follow-up question that relates to support or you call out anti-Semitism in important ways. Do you also support any candidate running against someone who is clearly an anti-Semite? Or how do you handle that?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, being a nonpartisan organization, we cannot publicly endorse candidates, right? Because we are a 501c3 nonprofit. But interesting enough, we actually do track local and state candidates who are coming out who are either known anti-Semites or are spewing anti-Semitic or hateful language. So even though we can't publicly endorse candidates, right? We're not in that game. We do track candidates for information for elected officials to show that, yes, these candidates are spewing anti-Semitism or hateful language.
All right, thank you. Jim Otis asks this question. Have you had any dialogues with Facebook, Twitter, or other social media companies regarding the hatred being spewed by them? Absolutely.
Fantastic question. We have spent years, literally years, talking with groups like Facebook, like Mark Zuckerberg, regarding time and time again and reiterating there are hate groups using your platforms. There are hate groups using your platforms, right? And oftentimes, and this is actually, I know I sound like a broken record. Jonathan Greenblatt mentions this in his book as well too. For a number of years, we've tried reaching out to executives and said, look, you all are not doing enough to prevent these groups from using your platforms to spew your hate. And oftentimes Mark Zuckerberg and other CEOs of social media companies said, okay, yeah, we'll do more. We'll do an audit. We'll do this. And hardly anything was done. Late last year, we had, of course, the break of the Facebook files, right? There were insiders who showed what was going on inside Facebook. And they include, to what ADL was saying for years, we have hate groups using our platforms. And so it is no longer a secret. It's no longer a niche subject. All Americans know this now. And I think as a result, Facebook is definitely feeling the pressure. And I know other social media platforms are as well to reform. And in fact, if you go to adl.org, we actually produce what we call a report card of social media platforms to see how well they are doing to monitor hate groups and to prevent them from using their social media platforms. Some are doing okay. Others, like Facebook and Twitter, not so much. So it is an ongoing problem. We have tried talking with them. We've tried different campaigns. We've done everything legally, I think, that we can in order to stop the spread of hate on social media.
Thank you. Lynn Davis asked this, and if you have any thoughts on it, how do you answer the comment that presenting cards to go into restaurants is like the identity cards the Jews had to carry during the Holocaust? Any thoughts on that?
Sure. Yeah. So I can say that while there are individuals who try to compare those two, I would really, really strongly discourage people from making that comparison. And as an organization, we have come out and publicly condemned people who try to compare COVID restrictions to the Holocaust. The reason why is, I think, just the general obvious opinion, what was happening in Nazi Germany in the 1930s and 40s is not anywhere similar to what is going on today. Right? Nazi Germany was trying to exterminate a state-sponsored government, trying to eliminate entire groups of people. While it is inconvenient, and I get it, and I'm in that same boat too. I hate having to show my vaccine card every time I want to go inside a restaurant, but that is nowhere comparable to identity cards for Jews. So I understand if people might want to try to compare those two, but I would strongly encourage people not to do that, given the fact that the Holocaust and COVID are so worlds apart from each other on what's going on.
Thank you. Here's one. The gist of it is there Jewish apathy with respect to getting the message out when synagogue membership and attendance continues to diminish? How do you deal with that? Sure,
absolutely. So I can tell you that I think the state of American Jewry is, I think, multifaceted. And it is looking at various polls. To your point, Ron, and I think to your point for the person to ask that question, yes, synagogue numbers are going down. However, it's similar to what is happening with churches, I think also with happening with mosques across the United States as well. We see numbers dwindling. However, with that said, even if numbers are still dwindling, if you were to go to a synagogue on a Friday night or a Saturday morning, especially here in Chicago, especially the bigger ones, attendance numbers are still pretty high. Even what we saw in Colleyville in Texas a couple weeks ago, there were only a few individuals that were at that synagogue at the time, and it only takes a few individuals to be kidnapped and to be put up for ransom for hostage, right? So regarding that number, what I can say is that synagogues and JCCs and Jewish federations, even if people maybe necessarily aren't going to synagogue services anymore, they're still going to federation events. They're still going to JCC events, right? There are different ways for people to express their Judaism, and there's still social events happening. And so that's why regarding anti-Semitism, I think regarding security, it's important to see Judaism. It's not just synagogues that need to be protected. It's Jewish federations, Jewish family services, JCCs that need to be protected as well.
Okay. Here's two that are related. I'm going to break them into two. One might be a short answer, and then I'll give you the second part. The short one, do you contact this is Fred Tannenbaum asking, do you contact local police departments like Evanston with the report incidents?
Yes. So oftentimes it's usually kind of a circular, kind of a two-way street. So sometimes we will report to law enforcement when certain things are taking place. Sometimes law enforcement will reach out to us. So like I mentioned, we have our Center on Extremism. We keep tabs on all different types of hate groups. And there are a number of instances where law enforcement will come to ADL and tell us, hey, what do you know about this group? What do you know about this individual? To give you an example, in Colleyville, Texas, after obviously police were alerted to the hostage situation, ADL as an organization, we were on the ground immediately. We were working with the FBI. We were working with Texas state law enforcement officials to give them intelligence, to give them background understanding, to be there to support them with knowledge they needed in order to prevent that situation, thankfully, from getting even further out of control. So sometimes it depends. We will either go to police, the police will come to us, or the party that was inflicted, whether it be a synagogue or somewhere, will go to police and then reach out to us. So there's kind of this three-way, if you will, kind of communication taking place between the group that was attacked, police officers, and ADL. And we have strong relationships with all parties.
Okay. And here's why I think this next question is related, from David Waterman. Is ADL using latest technologies such as artificial intelligence, security cameras, cyber tracking, etc., to identify and prosecute anti-Semitic activities and violence?
Yes. Yeah, I can definitely tell you regarding, and I'm not a tech person by any means, but regarding algorithms, regarding cyber, things like that, we actually, not only will we use those things ourselves, right, because our Center on Extremism major, and that's essentially what ADL is known for intelligence, for maintaining databases taking place with groups. We also present to organizations like yourselves on why social media groups are so dangerous regarding algorithms, that if you do one click, it'll take you to a different screen, or you click one video on YouTube and it suggests a bunch of other videos, and you go kind of down this rabbit hole. So regarding algorithms, regarding latest technology, yes, we use all those things, and our Center on Extremism does a tremendous job, like I said, in terms of tracking all types of hate groups from the far left and the far right.
Okay. Here's another question, and I get questions like this in my discussion groups too, and I'll kind of paraphrase it. Are there any surveys measuring how Trumpism, and I'm using Trumpism as the term to relate to those people who might support some of Trump's more racial views, okay? Not conservatives, but the Trump, are any surveys measuring how Trumpism, what kind of impact that has, the negative views on Jews and Jewish groups, based on any surveys that you've done on this for the word Trumpism, I guess?
Sure. ADL might have done things. So to be fair, I've been with ADL for about 6 or 7 months now. It was possibly we might have done a survey about that. I'm not aware on that specific topic. Normally when we do surveys, it's regarding kind of the general American society, or we focus specifically on anti-Semitism, or we'll focus on another ism, if you will, when we do our surveys to track. Kind of give you examples of other things we do. We have what's called our HEAT map, HEAT map, where it's very interactive and it's pretty cool. You can click and there are dots across the United States. And each dot represents some kind of hate incident that took place, whether it's anti-Semitic or anti-immigrant, anti-Black, right? And you can click on the dot and you can see what the incident took place, the date, and what exactly took place. So regarding Trumpism, or regarding surveys specifically with that, I'm not aware of ADL has done a survey about that, but we really try to keep it, I'd say, more general about what's going on with hate across the United States.
Okay, I have a couple more from the group. One I had that I wrote before you spoke, and I know you talked about it a bit, but I heard that you told us you were a history teacher. So my question is this way: does conservatives' attack on critical race theory restrict teachers' abilities to talk about issues that might, they're saying it could disturb our kids? Well, yes, it can. But like the Holocaust and anti-Semitism and other forms of racism, they might disturb our kids. But how do you feel as the teacher in you on this point? Is it wrong to kind of have these be put in so that you feel restricted in being able to talk about these issues?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So regarding restrictions, so what I can say is that, as a former teacher myself, that especially teaching world history, there were a lot of topics that were hard to teach. And I can tell you, when I've been studying the Holocaust since I was a kid. I love documentaries. I love watching things. I could probably talk about that topic for a long period of time. Teaching it to students who don't know a lot about it is harder than I think learning it. And I can understand. I believe teachers should have flexibility in terms of how they want to teach subjects. As a teacher, you're kind of taught, hey, you need to cover this, all these topics. Here are the suggested dates of how long to spend on each topic. And like I mentioned earlier, I had my curriculum specialist suggest I teach it for one day. And I said, that's unacceptable, completely unacceptable. And I ended up taking an entire week, right? And so regarding putting restrictions on teachers, it's a tricky subject because it essentially is telling people I don't trust teachers. I don't trust what you're teaching my students. And I think it also is something there that I think there are a lot of teachers who don't want to talk about the Holocaust. And I get it. It's a hard topic. It's a depressing topic. But at the same time, it needs to be discussed. And like I said, ADL, we actually have a program called Echoes and Reflections, where we will provide training to teachers to educate students on the Holocaust, to understand how to teach it, what activities to do, what makes it the most effective. But I think it's getting to a point now for teachers in classrooms to just discuss it, just to mention it, and not, hey, here's a worksheet, this is completed at the end of class, complete this. No, talk about it and have conversations. It is hard. But at the same time, we have a new generation of students who, and it blows my mind because and I'm sorry to go on a rant, but there are the very first topic I covered on that first week when I talked about the Holocaust was, and I told my students, ladies and gentlemen, this happened. I will not accept from any of you to think, oh, the Holocaust didn't happen. I heard on TikTok, no, unacceptable. I said there are things within the Holocaust that are worth debating, right? Or what happened, this happened when, right? Those things happen, but it's not debatable that the Holocaust not happen. So I think there are a generation of students, and it's very sad, that have almost no topic whatsoever to talk about the Holocaust. And no wonder they come out of high school and college and they think, oh, well, there weren't 6 million Jews that died. Oh, the Holocaust was kind of fake. It was, yeah, because people aren't talking about it. So it's something, I apologize to go on that rant, but it's something I'm very passionate about. But getting teachers to teach the Holocaust, making sure that states mandate Holocaust education is a necessity.
Oh, very good answer, Trent, especially in a time, unfortunately, in America where truth itself comes under attack. Just one more comment and then a final question. The comment is from Lou Solomon. Can we get a copy of your presentation? And I know you've okayed us taping you, so you're going to be available to anybody through the links that we're going to have. But what about your presentation on your PowerPoint? Is that available? Can you send it to Jill and Jill send it to all attendees?
So unfortunately, I would love to. Unfortunately, so our ADL office, they get a little finicky in terms of when we share things due to copyright materials, also due, like we have some sensitive information on here. So I apologize. They don't really like us emailing it. But I know we have this recorded, and hopefully my presentation will show up in that recording, so you'll be able to have it that way. I would normally say yes, but like I said, our ADL office tells people, like, we're not really allowed to share it. So I apologize for that, but I know we have this recording to where you can go back and record. And of course, I will share my email and my phone number, always available for further questions.
Excellent. No, that'll be perfect. And the last question is from Alan Kaufman. And it's very timely. I got this one too. The Whoopi Goldberg incident has made big headlines. Yeah. What is the ADL statement about this incident and the book that they were discussing? Absolutely.
Yeah. So Jonathan Greenblatt, our CEO, like I mentioned, I know I've said it 6 or 7 times by now, but he recently wrote a book. It was published last month. He's been on a major speaking tour. He actually went on The View, I believe it was last week, where Whoopi Goldberg formally apologized, and Jonathan Greenblatt accepted. And I think it was one of those instances where, and Jonathan mentions this in his book, that regarding cancel culture, or if celebrities say one thing wrong, that doesn't mean that they should just be done away with, right? We all make mistakes, right? I think the key thing is, regarding celebrities like Whoopi Goldberg, do individuals have a track record of saying inappropriate or offensive comments over and over and over again? And I think in Whoopi Goldberg's case, regardless of however you feel about her politically, she has, I think, been a major supporter of the Jewish community. Of course, we condemn her comments. Of course, they were inappropriate, but she apologized about them. We accept that apology, and I think she's willing to learn more from that. So I think that's just a common, we call that teshuvah in Judaism, right? The idea that you apologize, you try to make the situation better, and that we move on from it. So I think regarding celebrities, there are times a number of celebrities have made inappropriate comments. Maybe they didn't realize exactly what they were saying, but I think apologizing, trying to learn from that situation, moving on is key.
Trent, I see we have more questions. I'm
Sure.
going to ask Fred his, give me some feedback on this. Fred, I have about 4 more questions. If Trent can take those, or are we pressed for time?
Go ahead.
Sure. I
Okay,
have time.
are you okay with that, Trent?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, then let me go on. Seymour Teitelbaum asked this question. What are the universities doing to students who are found to be responsible, if anything, for students involved in defacing buildings with swastikas?
Yes. It's an excellent question. The reason why I'm chuckling, not because it's funny, because the University of Chicago, so not swastika specifically, but the University of Chicago, there is a group called Students for Justice in Palestine. So these are students, and each chapter is a little bit different. This chapter is very, very active on social media. And there are times when they cross the line, like I said, from anti-Israel sentiment to just blatant anti-Semitism. Their Instagram, they actually posted an Instagram post about a week ago in which they instructed all their fellow students, and there's a curse word, I won't repeat it, basically don't take Zionist classes. So they specifically called out Israeli professors at the University of Chicago, called out organizations like Birthright, which is a group that Jews are sent to Israel for a week or two to learn about Israel and Jewish culture, things like that. Don't participate in Birthright. Don't take these classes. Call out anybody who is affiliated with Israel, this apartheid state, right? These instances have happened specifically at the University of Chicago over the last few months. Our regional director, David Goldenberg, actually reached out to administration, sent an email saying that this is inappropriate. And the response from the university was essentially, it's free speech. Thank you, have a good day. And as a result of that, and this is why the ADL Hillel partnership is so key, which is ADL, we are here. Like I said, we're not going to be on campus leading the effort because there are a ton of groups that already do that, like Hillel, but we're going to be here to support those groups. In fact, I actually sent an email, a list of emails on Monday to all the major colleges across our Midwest region, introducing myself and saying, we have this new partnership in place. What can we do here in our Chicago office to help your campus, your university? And I've actually had a number of Hillels reach back out to me and say, and we've actually had meetings set up, and we're going to start those partnerships going forward so that when things like this happen, we can go to Hillels and say, what are you doing about this? How can ADL help? And what further can we do to prevent groups? Like I said, free speech is one thing. Anti-Semitism is something completely different. Hate speech is a line that should not be crossed.
Thank you. Fern Funk is asking, and I think we know the answer to this. Do you work with the Holocaust Museum in Skokie? They have an excellent program for schools and more than schools. And I know a docent is a good friend of mine.
Yes. Yes, so definitely, yes. I mean, we partner with, like I said, other Jewish organizations. There are times we will work with the Holocaust Museum. And like I said, we have our program here where we call Echoes and Reflections, where it's specifically geared toward teachers to teach them on how to educate students about the Holocaust. So yes, so it's a lot of those, like a lot of Jewish organizations, a lot of times our missions kind of overlap and we work together with each other to make sure that we provide as much material, as many resources as we can to the general public.
Okay. I'm trying to, maybe you'll understand this question better than I have in reading it, or maybe Pete or Hetty can raise their hand and ask it better than I'm going to quote here. Eli Wiesel once spoke and asked, what is the worst response to anti-Semitism? Is that a question you can answer?
Oof. I wish I could. I'm embarrassed because I'm a very big Elie Wiesel fan. I've read his book Night on numerous occasions. I know it is maybe not the specific answer that he's looking for, but I do remember Elie Wiesel, I believe, once said that, I think it was him that he had mentioned that evil persists when good people do nothing. It's one thing when groups, radical groups like BDS are out there protesting and spewing their hate. It's another thing when the vast majority of Americans kind of sit by and say,
yeah,
not my problem.
Yeah, we need to be an upstander and not just a bystander.
Yes.
Larry Dumont is asking, does ADL anticipate Deborah Lipstadt having any difficulty getting approved by the Senate?
I don't believe so. No, the biggest according to my advocacy team that I work with here, I think the biggest issue was and of course it's Capitol Hill, right? Everything's political, feelings get hurt, right? I think there was one statement I think that Dr. Lipstadt had said toward one of the senators years ago. And of course, when things go through the committees and subcommittees, they get lost or they kind of get pushed aside. I think what happened in Colleyville a month ago really kind of reinforced to senators that anti-Semitism is still a major problem here in the United States. And ADL and other groups are really pushing all people, not just Jewish Americans, but all Americans, to reach out to their members of Congress, specifically their senators, and say, she needs to be appointed to this position. It has nothing to do with qualifications whatsoever. For people who are not familiar with her, she has a doctorate, I believe, in Holocaust studies. She has been a renowned professor at Emory University. And there's actually a movie made about her when she actually took on, and I cannot remember the individual's name, but he was a British historian, I put historian in quotes, who was in fact a Holocaust denier and ended up going to court, and he was found to be guilty. So she is very well known, very respectable. So that's why we are really asking people to contact your senators. I will include that in my email, my follow-up email to Jill, where it's as simple as going to our website. If you type in your name and address, we will have a generated email sent for you, and all you have to do is click send. So super, super simple. Or if you want to call senators directly, their offices, more than welcome to do that as well. But that is the big push that we're making right now, that we really need an anti-Semitism envoy.
And I think you may have answered part of this or all of this question before, but let me read it in case you want to add something.
Sure.
With the assimilation, this is from Susie Schaub, with the assimilation of Jews in America, intermarriage, etc., does ADL partner with other religious leaders to have programs in their facility teach the Holocaust? For example, bringing in Holocaust survivors to speak to their youth.
Yeah, so we do. From what I'm familiar with, I'm sure that we've had programs in the past. We continue to have programs where it's not just Jewish organizations. I think, for instance, I mentioned earlier on another way to get involved. If you have a church group that you are a part of, I am more than happy to give this presentation to anyone who is willing to listen. Regarding Holocaust education, that Echoes and Reflections program that I've mentioned, not just for Jewish day school teachers, it is open to public schools, private schools, non-denominational schools. It's open to any teacher as well. So ADL, we really try to hone in that we're not just a Jewish group, even though I just spent the last hour talking about anti-Semitism because that's what I focus in on. We really are an anti-hate organization. Wherever hate spews, we're there to give our support to stop it from happening further.
Okay, one more comment, which I'll read, and then a last question that might lead to a whole other hour program down the road, but not today.
Sure.
The comment is that this tape that we're doing will be uploaded to the northshoreseniorcenter.org website in about 4 weeks. So anyone here that wants to tell their friends to kind of look at this great program and learn more, just wait about 4 weeks and then you'll be advised when it's available. Now, Don asked a question that to me would lead to the next program. What is the profile of people who commit anti-Semitic acts? Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that is a whole, Don, it's a great question. That you're right. That's a whole other program. I could bring in one of my Center on Extremism analysts, and they go over everything from specific hate groups to identifying their tattoos to flags to everything you'd want to know about them. But oftentimes it is, and this is, I'll mention, the book again. Jonathan included he has a friend, a person he considers a friend, who was a former neo-Nazi skinhead. And a lot of times it is people who, and it's a lot of times it's young people. And it's a lot of people who are looking for belonging, are looking for community. And a lot of times they turn to hate groups and they turn to people who are willing to listen to them and make them feel involved. And a lot of times the hate comes later. So that's one aspect. There's another aspect. There are people who are born to be hateful because their parents or grandparents or relatives believe certain things and pass them on to others. So there's not one characterization, I think, of how people get into extremism. I think there are multiple avenues. I think the scary part is that because there are multiple avenues that it's very easy to slip in. Another example is people who go down the rabbit hole of YouTube or social media, people who are radicalized by just watching videos on social media one over again and again and again. And people had to kind of take a step back and realize, oh, this is not, how did I get to this point? That's the scary part. So it can be done a number of ways. But like I said, yeah, that would be a whole other reason for a whole other day where they can go into specifics on that.
One other question being slipped in. We can't let you go, Trent.
Sure.
This is from Jim Otis. Can you tell us of any great example of another faith helping Jewish groups?
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. I think because of the coalition partners that we have, when things like this happen, especially like what happened in West Rogers Park, people in the Muslim community came out and condemned it. People in the Christian community, all different types of denominations came out against it. I'm actually part of it's a virtual group that meets 3 or 4 times a year. It's a Jewish Episcopalian organization where we get together and we actually talk about Old Testament passages and New Testament passages and how it relates to those, to both of our faiths. And so, yeah, we have coalition partners who are religious, who are secular. Hate is a topic. I think it's a good way to wrap up. Hate is a topic that doesn't know any bounds. It affects everybody, regardless of faith, regardless of religion, regardless of skin color. And it's something that unfortunately unites us all. And I think it's something that can unite all of us to prevent hate from spewing, and at the same time, creating a more just society for future generations.
Excellent, Trent. I thank you, and I know Don wants to thank you. I'm going to turn it back to Don, who can then turn it back to our president, Fred. But thank you so much. It was a wonderful presentation.
Absolutely. And then Don, real quick, I actually just put in the chat, for those of you that are on Zoom right now, there's a very, very short 2-minute survey that we'd like to give out to individuals. And this helps with our grant reporting and donors, things like that. I just put it in the chat here. For those that are on Zoom, if you have just 2 minutes to fill out that survey, we would greatly, greatly appreciate it. We use that information, like I said, for grants and donors. But I will follow up with Jill Becker on providing all kinds of different things I talked about, different ways to get involved with ADL. I will definitely include my contact information if people have additional questions or would like to reach out.
And you could put that link in there too.
Excellent.
But you can, if anyone wants to click on it now, you won't lose Don saying thank you. But Don, go ahead, please, and then turn it over to Fred, please.
Yeah, I want to, Trent, thank you so much. You've been so cooperative in setting this up, and your information today was enlightening, and we always learn something. So I thank you very much on behalf of the program committee.
Thank you very much, Don. Thank you all very much for attending. Like I said, I'll be in touch with Jill. Would love to hear from you all. Thank you so much for attending today. I hope everyone has a good day.
Thank you very
Fred.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day. Hope to see you all next week.